Not everyone is convinced that we're getting the full picture about HIV and AIDS. Let's now speak to Dr. Christian Fiala, who joins us from Vienna. Dr. Fiala, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Now, I understand that you believe the UN's HIV figures are actually overblown. What makes you so sure about this?
Well, I studied in depth the underlying diagnosis and the processing of these figures, and it is since more than 10 years that I have pointed to the fact that the basis of these figures, especially from Africa, is makes no clinical sense. The so-called Bangui definition, which is the AIDS definition in Africa, is useless from a clinical point of view, and I am mainly a clinician. And then these figures have been blown up by UNAIDS in Geneva just to scare the people and to scare the world population without any benefit.
But surely the figures speak for themselves that people are dying in Africa and throughout the world from HIV/AIDS, aren't they? I mean, are you saying that, in effect, that AIDS doesn't exist and that this is some sort of conspiracy?
People are dying, and they are mainly dying as a consequence of poverty.
HIV does not cause AIDS. That's a government lie. You get AIDS from the government. Okay? When you take an HIV test, you are getting a test to test antibodies. The only thing that the HIV test does is test whether or not you have a certain level of HIV antibodies in your blood. It is an antibody test. What's wrong with an antibody test? The problem with an antibody test is it only tests for antibodies, which means that you can have cancer antibodies because you breathe them in through the air. Every one of us is walking around with the antibodies of some disease, but your immune system kills them. Within a day, they're gone. Within a week, they're gone. So the fact that you have HIV antibodies or cancer antibodies or flu antibodies doesn't necessarily mean you get the disease, because your immune system tends to stomp it out before they have a chance to grow. So the reason why so many people are walking around with HIV who will never develop AIDS is because HIV has nothing to do with AIDS. That is a myth. That is a hoax. Okay, you get AIDS from the government. All right, HIV does not cause AIDS. Look at Magic Johnson. He was diagnosed with HIV back in the 80s. Okay, it hasn't turned into full-blown AIDS yet, okay? Because HIV has nothing to do with AIDS. You get AIDS from the government. HIV has never been proven in any case to cause AIDS. AIDS, Ebola, West Nile, those are government diseases.
Because it's been surrounded from day one with so much emotion, very few people are capable of looking at AIDS logically.
There is a group of AIDS denialists that say that HIV does not exist and has never been isolated, which is as bizarre as it gets.
The probable cause of AIDS has been found.
Credit must go to our eminent doctor, Robert Gallo, who produced this discovery.
Gallo said he had all these viruses, and it was a lie.
These are HIV here?
Yeah.
Oh, so are these HIV too?
Yeah.
Everything's
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
The presently available data does not prove the existence of HIV.
I mean, it exists.
Why do you believe that HIV does cause AIDS?
Because that's all the information that I've been given.
Because that's what the scientific community has told us.
AIDS is not a disease. AIDS is a whole lot of different things.
Some countries, they'll make up their own definition.
The more diseases they could lump into this AIDS syndrome, the more patients they could catch.
Peter is highly intelligent, but he's killing people with his theories.
I'm about to go in for my first HIV test, and I'm a little nervous.
Tell me about your sex life.
I'm not gay, I'm not a hemophiliac, and I've never used intravenous drugs.
Now, if I tell you that the test you took was lousy and didn't mean a thing, does that make any difference for everybody to hear?
Did the answers to these questions help aid in the diagnosis?
Of course they did.
Really?
They do. But HIV testing isn't an absolutely precise science.
AIDS is one thing in Greenwich Village and a very different thing in Kampala, Uganda.
The vast majority of the world's population is not at any measurable risk of HIV infection.
I think HIV totally has turned out not to be the cause of AIDS. HIV has turned out not to be.
We can be exposed to HIV many times without being chronically infected.
Our immune system could get rid of the virus within a few weeks if you have a good immune system.
This is an AZT label, as used by laboratory researchers. In America, this AZT label is used as anti-AZT propaganda. In South Africa, few people are even aware of the controversy surrounding this anti-AIDS drug.
Any doctor, any scientist, medical scientist, who has actually dispensed AZT to an AIDS patient or an HIV positive patient since the Concord trials has actually been a party to murder.
I don't buy that. I'll show them people that I haven't killed.
In hindsight, when I look back at the fact that I went off the drug, I suspect that it did actually save my life because everybody else who was on the drug has subsequently died.
Glaxo Wellcome manufactures the drug. Their stake in it is worth billions.
We find it unusual that these safety aspects or allegation of safety aspects on AZT have suddenly arisen in South Africa. They have not arisen in any other country around the world, in over 100 countries where the drug is registered. There is no other regulatory body which is on the same terms as the Medicines Control Council that is reviewing AZT because of safety problems.
If it is the first time, and somebody has to start.
The government has refused to supply the drug for free. This saves them billions.
What we are trying to do is to put on the table information so that the citizens of this country, if by any means, which are illegal means, if by any means they get hold of AZT, they do it knowingly so that tomorrow nobody should say we were not told.
HIV expert Ruben Scher believes AZT is a lifesaver if used correctly.
At certain doses the drug can kill you, and certain doses it can be beneficial.
Professor Mhlongo investigated AZT in London. He believes the drug can be a death sentence.
My opinion about AZT is that it is a drug which is highly, highly toxic. And in fact, if you were to take it for a longish period, 3 months or more, you may develop a syndrome much more serious than AIDS itself.
22 years ago, in a decision rooted in fear rather than fact, the United States instituted a travel ban on entry into the country for people living with HIV/AIDS. Now, we talk about reducing the stigma of this disease, yet we've treated a visitor living with it as a threat. We lead the world when it comes to helping stem the AIDS pandemic, yet we are one of only a dozen countries that still bar people from HIV from entering our own country. If we want to be the global leader in combating HIV/AIDS, we need to act like it. And that's why on Monday, my administration will publish a final rule that eliminates the travel ban, effective just after the new year. Congress and President Bush began this process last year, and they ought to be commended for it. We are finishing the job. It's a step that will encourage people to get tested and get treatment. It's a step that will keep families together, and it's a step that will save lives.